Today, rapper Boosie, whose real name is Torrance Ivy Hatch Jr., pleaded guilty to a charge of being a felon in possession of a firearm.
So this charge stems from his 2023 arrest in San Diego's Choice View neighborhood, where police found the 42-year-old with 2 guns during a traffic stop.
There are moments that feel small on paper but shake the room in real life. Boosie Badazz just accepted a federal plea in his California gun case. Routine to some, explosive to others. And the internet is treating it like a fuse that could light up the whole board. The facts are simple, he's taking a deal. The details aren't public. The reaction? Not simple at all. Some fans hear plea and picture dominoes falling everywhere. Others say it's exactly what it sounds like, a man ending a long, draining fight. Both can't be right. But one thing's clear, this isn't the end of a story, it's the start of a louder one. Let's keep the ground solid. The case traces back to June 2023 in San Diego, when police found guns during a stop. State charges fell away in 2024. The feds kept going.
The biggest thing right now was that you actually accepted a plea deal for your federal case.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been, from the very, very beginning?
I've been for probably 3 years now, probably.
3 years.
Yeah, about 3 years, 25. Huh?
Early August 2025, Boosie says he accepted a plea. That's real. What nobody outside the room knows yet are the exact terms. No public document spelling out the sentence, the conditions, the trade-offs, so anyone acting like they've seen the paperwork is guessing. The only thing on record is the decision to take the deal. Everything else to be announced. If the facts are that straightforward, why is everybody acting like the ceiling's about to cave in? Because rumors move faster than filings. The minute Boosie said he took a plea, timelines didn't wait for documents, they filled the blanks. Screenshots got cropped, quotes lost their context, threads stitched together half-truths into neat narratives. When the official record is quiet, the loudest voice feels like the truth.
Boosie Badazz just pled out with the feds. Boosie probably going to jail, I ain't gonna lie. Boosie caught another good gun case. It was a Fed case. He put up something on Twitter along the lines of, I'm tired of fighting. I talked to my family, made the decision, the best decision for the family. That means I'm going to jail.
Damn.
Boosie owed his shit, and I would be surprised if he get any less than 3 years.
Rumors suggest the plea is bigger than one case. Reports claim it could be leverage, pressure here, questions there, maybe a wider net. That's the storyline racing through comment sections and panel clips. To be clear, there's no public confirmation of a broader probe tied to his deal. It's speculation, packaged like certainty because certainty goes viral. This is how the machine works. A 5-second hallway video becomes evidence. A spicy thumbnail turns into a verdict. A single unverified source gets echoed by 3 podcasts and suddenly sounds official. Algorithms reward confidence, not caution. The more dramatic the claim, the more the clip travels.
All right, on to a little more serious news here. A well-known rapper with a big following on social media could be headed back to prison after he pleaded guilty to a gun charge in federal court today.
Boosie was arrested during a traffic stop here in San Diego 2 years ago.
Viewers lean in because the elements are addictive. Money, mystery, power. Secrecy looks like a sign, not a gap. Parasocial trust gives creators extra weight even when they're guessing. But the difference between buzz and proof is simple. Paper. Until something filed, signed, and dated shows up. The rest is noise with good graphics. But this frenzy didn't start last week. It's been brewing for years, and one moment in 2022 made the whispers impossible to ignore. Houston has long had its own gravity. Music, money, and rooms where both show up after midnight.
He initially planned to plead guilty for probation, but the case was then dismissed last year after a Ninth Circuit court ruled that it was unconstitutional to ban nonviolent felons from owning guns. A larger panel from that court, though, later reversed the ruling, upholding the ban. So now Boosie is set to be sentenced.
In 2022, a Chicago jeweler fans knew as Duke the jeweler was shot and killed near the Arena Theater after attending a concert earlier that evening. Local coverage confirmed the loss. The shock rippled fast through artists, clients, and fans who'd seen his pieces on some of the biggest names. In the noise that followed, timelines were stitched together from clips and comments, but official answers stayed scarce. Boosie addressed it publicly and denied any involvement. And beyond that, much of what people repeated online lived in the realm of assumption rather than documentation. That gap between grief and verified detail is where rumors multiply. What kept the moment alive wasn't just the tragedy, It was how neatly it slotted into a story people already believed about late-night rooms, high-stakes energy, and the idea that luck isn't the only thing in play.
So this has been like hanging over you. And you know, we've talked about this before. At first it was a state case, your lawyers came in, the state case was dropped, and out of nowhere the feds picked it up.
Now it was a state case, the feds came, picked it up. They had a ruling in the Supreme Court that went in my favor.
When the facts run thin, narratives step in. That's why this single event became a reference point, a prism that colors every new headline out of Houston. The reality is simple: a life was lost, questions remain, and the public record hasn't tied the online dots the way the internet has. And once the room starts connecting dots, every separate headline starts to look like the same picture. Here's the truth about rumor ecosystems. Once a pattern catches on, it becomes the explanation for everything. Rumors suggest certain high-stakes games were more politics than luck, exclusive, strategic, and built to keep the home team winning. Reports claim guests checked in, names were noted, and the room always knew who held what. That's the lore.
Yeah, maybe even 5. It's the feds. They got minimum mandatories. That's just what it is. You know what I mean? So, not to say free Boosie, because he ain't there, but, you know, that's where we headed to, baby.
Damn, Boosie.
I know that sucks, right?
It spreads because it feels cinematic. It endures because almost nothing about those nights is public record. There are no official documents confirming rigged tables or engineered outcomes. What we have are stories, repeated, remixed, and retold until they feel like facts. They aren't. They're unverified claims living in comments, podcasts, and panel clips, not in filings and affidavits. The vacuum helps the legend grow. Invite-only rooms, no cameras allowed, and a handful of first-person accounts that contradict each other just enough to keep curiosity on a drip. Add the social media amplifier. A dramatic thumbnail, a clipped quote, a recycled 5-second hallway video that gets treated like a confession. A single anecdote becomes a pattern. Then the pattern becomes a playbook.
Legal name is Torrance Hatch. Now, a lot of times defendants don't really want to talk to us if they're still going through court proceedings, but he was fine with it. He says he accepts responsibility for what happened and he's ready to move forward.
Meanwhile, people who were actually there either say nothing or say just enough to be read both ways. That combination of mystery and selective memory is why this storyline survives every debunk and every disclaimer. And that's the sticky part. Even when the facts are thin, perception moves the room. A whisper about who really runs a table can change who shows up, who stays late, and who suddenly finds a reason to leave early. Still, perception gets turbocharged when a separate high-profile loss hits the same city. And that's exactly what happened next. Different night, different facts. Same city under the microscope. In November 2022, Takeoff was shot and killed outside a downtown bowling alley after a private event. Police later arrested Patrick Xavier Clark, who was charged and later released on bond with conditions while the case moved through court. Coverage was wall-to-wall. Filings and hearings put key beats into the public record. Yet for timeline watchers, the specifics mattered less than the shape of the story. A high-profile gathering, a late hour, energy turning on a dime, and tragedy before sunrise. That pattern, fair or not, supercharged every rumor that followed. Reports at the time described an argument that escalated outside while Takeoff stood nearby. Authorities later emphasized he wasn't the instigator. Fans mourned, artists paused to reassess security, and managers began asking harder questions about where their clients go after shows. The ripple wasn't just emotional, it was logistical. Promoters tweaked end times, teams shortened hangouts. Brands quietly redrew their risk maps for certain cities and scenes. That's how one case became more than a headline. It turned into a lens. Whenever Houston trends for late-night drama, people look through the Takeoff story and see echoes, even when the facts don't line up cleanly. And once a lens like that clicks into place, it reframes everything that comes next. So when a new plea pops up in 2025, people don't just ask, what does it mean for Boosie? They ask, who else might feel the heat?
And the case got dropped by the judge. The case got dropped. They went appeal the Supreme Court ruling. And they won on the Supreme Court ruling. Now it was back again. I could have appealed that, but that'll be 2-3 more years.
Let's strip the drama. A federal plea can mean a lot of different things, and most of them aren't cinematic. Sometimes it's a straight trade. Plead to a specific count, lock in the risk, and avoid the wild card of trial. Sometimes it's an open plea where the judge decides the sentence later. Other times it's a negotiated deal with a recommended range, or even a binding agreement where both sides ask the judge to accept a fixed outcome. None of those automatically equals cooperation. Here's the usual rhythm after a plea: a presentence interview, a report that calculates the guideline range, written memos from both sides, and then a sentencing date. The numbers can swing based on priors, enhancements, and whether the person accepts responsibility. If cooperation exists in any case, it typically shows up in very specific ways, like a government motion asking for a reduction, sometimes in public, sometimes under seal. If there's no cooperation, there's no such motion, and the case moves to sentencing like any other. The important part here is what we don't have: public terms. Without those, everything about who said what is just guesswork dressed up as certainty. A plea can be strategy, it can be closure, it can be damage control. But until paperwork hits the docket, nobody outside that room knows which version this is. Yet perception doesn't wait for paperwork. It races ahead, and the industry reacts in real time. Music runs on relationships, schedules, and rollout plans. Whenever whispers turn into trending topics, teams get skittish. Brands don't like risk. Promoters don't want headlines that eclipse the event. Executives track cities on a safe bet spreadsheet. Rumors suggest that as soon as a storyline starts snowballing, itineraries shift, not because anyone has proof of anything, but because nobody wants to be in the frame when the next clip goes viral. On the ground, that looks practical, not dramatic. Fewer open invite after parties, tighter guest lists, earlier curfews, no phones pouches at certain rooms, and security doing full pre-advances with promoters instead of winging it. Tour managers reroute hotel choices, build decoy arrivals, and add a second SUV just to keep movement clean. Even the vibe changes. Shorter hangouts, quicker goodbyes, fewer side missions after shows. It's not paranoia, it's policy. Up the ladder, label and brand teams pull out the brand safety checklist. Contracts get reread, morals clauses get highlighted, and insurance asks sharper questions about venue history and private events. One flag city can go from anchor to maybe overnight. Reports claim some partners now require extra sign-offs for late-night activations or swap splashy club moments for daylight meet and greets that feel safer on paper and cleaner in headlines. Meanwhile, the Whisper Network does what it does. Group chats between tour managers, security directors, and promoters move faster than any press release. A single hallway clip, real context or not, gets looped, captioned, and stitched until an anecdote becomes a pattern, and the pattern gets treated like policy. None of that proves anything about any specific room. It proves how powerful perception is when the algorithm turns a nudge into a narrative. And that's the point. Even when the facts are thin, optics rewrite calendars and budgets, rooms get quieter, collabs get slower. Money looks for safer sidewalks. Which is why this moment matters, even if the plea is just a plea. The stakes aren't only legal, they're cultural. And that sets up the real question: what shows up on paper and what stays rumor? That fork is where this story goes next. So where does it go from here? Two clean paths, one messy middle. Path 1. This is exactly what it looks like. A man takes a deal, finishes the process, and the story shrinks back to the size of the paperwork. Court dates appear, a sentence lands, and the rumor cycle loses steam because nothing bigger ever surfaces. In that world, the loudest part of the saga was the speculation, not the record. Path 2. Something formal connects dots the internet has been sketching for years. Not a clip, not a caption, a filing. Think a plea agreement that actually hits the docket, a sentencing memo with unusual language, a motion from prosecutors that signals cooperation, or a press release that names names. If that happens, you won't need hints. You'll have paragraphs, signatures, and case numbers. The messy middle is where most stories live. A swirl of commentary, halfway quotes, and out-of-context screenshots that feel definitive, but aren't. That's where good channels get selective. They don't treat a dramatic thumbnail like evidence. They look for documents, dates, and statements from counsel. Until those show up, the smartest stance is simple: separate the echo from the evidence. There's also a human layer here that timelines skip. Lives were lost. Families still don't have every answer. Artists and crews are trying to do business without turning every after party into a headline. Even if the final chapter is quiet, the wake-up call remains: proximity to chaos has a cost on calendars, on budgets, and on people. So the question isn't just what happens to Boosie, it's what happens to the rooms. Do teams change how late they stay? Do brands redraw their maps? Do cities that once felt like home field start feeling like away games? Those shifts don't wait for verdicts. They happen the minute perception decides it's safer to step left than right. Here's the bottom line. Truth moves slower than myth, but lasts longer. If something bigger is coming, it'll arrive in black and white, not bold text over a screenshot. Until then, keep your eye on the only things that actually change the story. New filings, credible reporting, and names attached to statements. Everything else is just volume. And that's the takeaway. In a culture built on momentum, the real power move is patience. Listening past the noise, waiting for the paper, and knowing the difference between buzz and proof.